Welcome to my basement, everybody. I have put together a wonderful interview for you guys this week. It is with Naughty Dog co-founder Andy Gavin, somebody that I haven't spoken with in a very long time, but we used to see all the time. And if you're watching our classic episodes of The Electric Playground, you can watch them every weekend. They premiere every weekend on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/EPNTV. Saturdays at 9 a.m. Pacific, we are launching new episodes. And episode 7 from our first season just premiered, and Andy is featured prominently in that episode because we visited Naughty Dog as they were embarking on the journey for Crash Bandicoot 2, one of the coolest PlayStation 1 games ever made. How are you, sir? How's everything going?
I'm great, and great to be here again and to see you again all these years later. Like that original video, I remember it was literally filmed 2 blocks from where I am right now.
That's wild. That's awesome. Hey, listen, we have a sponsor for Vic's Basement, and I just want to give a shout out to our friends at 505 Games.
A soldier's greatest wish is not to be working after all. If it helps, there's once a noble sacrifice for the betterment of humankind.
Laying down arms and surrendering is, well, it's not the worst of our available options. We should just finish this!
All right, who's next? Keep them coming.
I also chose my path, and I will see it through to the end!
Thank you so much for sponsoring this episode of Vic's Basement. Very, very cool. Andy, let's get into the formation of Naughty Dog, because, of course, you and Jason Rubin built this business that grew into, I don't know, just this juggernaut company. Did you see the potential for that when you were traveling across the country?
Well, that was long after we formed. We actually formed, we met in, I think, 1982.
Wow.
Like, two of us at like 12. And we both loved to play video games. And video games were super new then. And we both had Apple IIs that we had just gotten.
Right.
And I was, in those days, games were super expensive. They were like $50, $1982. We were kids. You weren't really going to buy them. And so I was programming some of my own games, and Jason was like drawing art for some. And you probably can't even imagine how crude the tech was in 1982. But we joined forces basically because like I was a much better programmer and he was a much better artist. And we just started like making games. And we were making them through high school, and they started really small. And there were a whole bunch of games before Crash Bandicoot, like 5 major published games.
Amazing. Amazing. Did your parents get an understanding that you had this talent, that you had a gift for this, and maybe some of your friends were playing the games that you were building? Did people get to know you guys? Okay.
Like it was just this weird thing that we did on the computer. But then when we started getting paid, because we formed Naughty Dog, and it wasn't selling a lot of copies. Like in those days, you might sell like 10, 15,000 copies of something. And some of the later games got up to, a couple 100,000 copies or whatever. But as it started, there started to actually be revenue. They're like, huh. But they never really understood like the process or what was involved, at least in those days.
That's wild. What was the first, inkling that you guys had a real business? When did you guys kind of know that this was going to be your life?
I think it was a very long time before we thought it was a real business. And we were doing it and we did through high school, we did it through college, did it through grad school. It wasn't actually until halfway through grad school when I quit. I was at MIT studying AI, which is nowadays.
That's funny.
And left to like sort of go at it full time, that it became like the main real thing. However, it was already before that, like the thing I spent the most time on and the thing I cared most about in life. It's just that like it took many years to tell myself even that this sort of that this was going to be my career.
Were you playing a lot of stuff then? Were you also, consuming? Oh, yeah. And what were you a big fan of?
Particularly in the early days, I played, like on the Apple II or everything, things like the 2600, the NES, like everything arcade games, like just played a ton of stuff. I have my particular favorite genres, which are still actually sort of my favorite genres, like uh what is sort of essentially are action RPGs are among my favorites. Like I loved games like Castlevania and Ghouls and Ghosts, and even back on like the 2600, um, like adventure
Yeah.
and some actiony RPGs. Yeah. So my favorite games today still are Dark Souls uh, and which is essentially basically Super Ghouls and Ghosts, like serious
You're
Japanese
right.
Gothic action, you
Yeah.
know, like like it has actually the same kind of difficulty style. Like they're not, thematically, Super Ghouls and Ghosts was much more cartoony because all games were at that time.
Yeah.
And Castlevania, Bloodborne, another favorite of mine, is like basically like Castlevania
That's totally true.
or
I'd
Gauntlet is
never
a
thought to look
favorite
at
of
it that
mine.
way. That's great.
I play a ton of Diablo. I play, like WoW, Baldur's Gate. Like I played D&D in those days. Wizardry, Ultima. Uh, like Diablo is basically Gauntlet, which was
Yeah.
like my all-time favorites. Spent a lot of quarters on that one. Jason and I both did. We used to like go get $10 with the quarters, which was a lot in the early 80s, and
Yeah.
like the mall and just like pump them into the Gauntlet machine.
What was it about Jason that made him your friend? How did you
Uh,
guys connect? Because you had
oh,
such a long
Jason's just an
relationship
awesome,
together.
yeah, Jason's just an awesome guy, and he's brilliant, super talented, like charismatic, like, and we had a good synergy uh, together. Like we both really were very passionate about games, enjoy the process of making them, coming up with the ideas, and like I was more technical, but I have some art sense. Like I consider my mom's an oil painter, and I've worked with artists like my whole life. And Jason is fundamentally an artist, but he's and a product guy, but he's also very technical for an artist.
Mm,
So we like making video games marries both of those things and many several other things. Like, but
yeah.
it's very much like a technical art. Like without artistry of video game artists, video games are really crap. I mean, there's some that don't have much art, like Dwarf Fortress or something.
Yeah.
But pretty much
Zork.
pretty much every decent game, 99% of decent games have a lot of art,
Yeah.
and they have great art directors and great artists, and the game design and the art design and the setting and the story are all wrapped together.
And do you think that that's um, the secret of Naughty Dog too? Because it always had a beautiful blending of proven design philosophy, but also this mind-bending art, and that goes all the way back to the earliest days. Even Way of the Warrior, there was just this beauty to the work. And is it? I don't know. Could you
Yeah,
kind
then you
of
have the more
trace it
modern
back
ones,
to you
like
guys?
I would say, like at the time when like Uncharted 4 came out, I'm like, this is, and I played all the way through it, like, and I'm like, it's the best looking video game yet made. Now that the
Yeah.
title has been taken because it's and you would probably say of Last of Us 2, that it had like some of the best graphics ever.
Oh yeah.
Whether it's like the most beautiful, it's too dark to be beautiful. Exactly. It has a
Yeah.
sort of beauty, but like it
Yeah.
is, the artistry is unquestionable.
Yes.
But there are a
Yeah.
lot of video games like that. Like all the Miyazaki, like FromSoft games are also beautiful in their
Yeah.
own twisted, dark Japanese Gothic way. And many, many video games are beautiful. Like a larger percentage, they were often uglier in the old days. But yeah, that was a very important thing to us. That the game we just thought of it as firing on all cylinders. The game had to play well, be technically like groundbreaking, look great, sound great. The sound is actually exceedingly important.
Yes.
There were some aspects we didn't care about for our genres, like games like, well, we made role-playing games actually before Crash, some of which where we did care about a lot about story, but with Crash and Way of the Warrior 2, we very deliberately did not care much about story,
Right.
like a veneer of a story, because in that time, like beginning Crash Bandicoot 1994, we thought that like setting and character were extremely important. You could see the love and detail put into the Crash games with regard to that, but story, plot, that's not really important to it.
Yes,
is
that
because the player is like doing the doing, and it's about like the action and like being in this other world and this cartoony world and the fun factor of all that. It's not about like, oh, the complex motivations why Dr. Cortex is trying to take over the world. He's a cartoon villain. Of course he's trying to take over the world, you know.
yeah, there was still a level of storytelling complexity that we were witnessing in that evolution compared to previous, action platformers and things like that. You were pushing the genre forward with because of I have to think your connections to Universal and to Hollywood and to the libraries that you were building. Was there an awareness with Crash Bandicoot that you were
Yeah, that was actually very
creating a
deliberate.
franchise type character?
One of the reasons we went to Universal, because we were entertaining several different distributor publishers, is Naughty Dog always remained independent until Sony bought it. And it's still quite independent in its way. It's run very much as it's a wholly owned subsidiary of Sony, but it makes its own creative decisions. Neil and the team there have to answer to Sony about the budget. There's conversations about that, and there's follow the HR rules and things like that. But they'd make the games they want to make. That was part of our deal, and Sony understood actually that you don't want to mess with that because you're not going to get like a good, creative, innovative game out of the marketing department by the numbers, like game
Yeah,
creator.
yeah,
And um, but going into that whole Universal deal, we chose to go that way because we thought we could take advantage of many of the things that Universal had to offer. It took some getting used to adapt to that, and not everything that they maybe thought they had to offer turned out to be useful. Or we thought, like for example, like we didn't really use Hollywood writers at that stage. Like later,
mm,
you know, maybe, but we leveraged production design and sound design and like music and also a lot of philosophical things. But we found that you couldn't just take them wholesale from like the film or television business, and that people in film and television didn't know how to make video games at all.
yeah.
Now, those people are incredibly talented and do like awesome stuff. Like, uh, but they're just different because, like, say you're writing a movie script. Well, I've written two novels and some screenplays. Haven't actually had any screenplays made, uh, but the story is the most important thing there, and character, and like the center. Like as I was saying last night to someone vis-a-vis Rebel Moon, uh, like where they were actually involved in that project. I'm like, you had to be able to tell from the script that it was terrible.
There was nothing. Yeah.
That's just, like the script is totally derivative with like no character development.
No, many
And it
problems in
looks
that. Yeah.
good.
Yeah.
It's not exactly with the directing. It's like instead of more with the producing and the script and with the yes, it's overblown in its directing too, but like it does look good.
Yeah.
Like cool visuals and stuff. And there's some interesting world building, but like there's for a movie, the most important thing is character.
Yeah.
And then story falls out of character. Like it's, something like the first Star Wars, New Hope, like it seems trite now because it's old and stuff. But one of the reasons it really worked as a movie in 1977 and after was that it started with a very likable cast of
Yeah.
characters with
Yeah.
classic, interesting dynamics. You got Luke who's discovering his role. You've got you know, the lovable rogue in Han Solo, the feisty and surprisingly capable Leia, Obi-Wan's like wise mentor, and Darth Vader's like very charismatic, dark, creepy villain, So it's not like super deep. It's not the English patient, but there are interesting characters with interesting dynamics and good dialogue.
What's the
Like,
analogy with games? Was
analogy with games is you start with mechanics. So
the
games,
play of it.
it's all about gameplay.
Hmm.
But gameplay has multiple levels, just as like in a story is like, there's character and motivation and story and plot and the actual things that happen stuff. With video games, you've got at the very, very core is mechanic.
Hmm.
And so let's take Crash Bandicoot. Crash Bandicoot is a character action game in the mold of Super Mario, Yoshi's Island, Donkey Kong Country. Like it's 3D, so the mechanics are a little different, but essentially you got mechanically control a single character moving through the levels. There's a lot of fast-paced timing obstacles that you have to apply your small set of running, jumping, spinning, bonking behaviors. Like that's all Crash can do, like in Crash 1. Okay, but
Yeah.
that's enough. It's a
Yeah.
it's a vocabulary for his interaction with the world. There's important
And it
other
had to
aspects.
feel right. It had to
Yeah,
feel right. Yes. I
that
guess just like the story in a movie, when we don't know these characters, they have to feel right. And Rebel
the
Moon
characters have
does
to,
not feel right.
yeah, they can't feel like dumb. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, but the mechanic equivalent, and sometimes games will occasionally succeed. For example, Tomb Raider 1 is a
Yeah.
game that succeeds despite a crappy initial. Uh,
Totally. Right.
However, it's well, so there's the different layers. So you might say of like in Crash, the core mechanic is you run, you jump, you spin, and whatever. And then there's the next layer up is that you traverse through the levels, and there's like pits and platforms and skunks and crabs and stuff like that. And you smash boxes and you get fruit and stuff out of boxes, and you can just get levels up and Aku Aku Mass and stuff at levels. So that's one layer up from the low level mechanics. That's like it's part of the sort of lower level meta in like Crash.
Yeah.
And so in something like Tomb Raider, that meta is that you explore these tombs and there's traps and like gunfights and
Yeah.
stuff. That
Yeah.
part of Tomb Raider is quite good.
Yes.
The mechanic now later games got better at this, but the I don't know, I'm knocking on Tomb and Tomb Raider has like great setting and character feel and stuff for a game. But it's core I'm just talking about PlayStation 1, Tomb Raider 1.
Yeah.
Like we both
The
remember.
Oh, dude, yes. No, and Tommy and
Okay.
I would fight about that. It's just like, well,
Yeah.
especially coming off of Super Mario 64, which I think
It
revolutionized
also
the way
has
that,
great mechanics, yeah,
yeah,
and 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 great meta and so on. But Tomb Raider's movement, like how you actually control Lara, and like
so
the
clunky.
yes, very clunky. Another
Yeah.
one, another great game with clunky core mechanic was GTA 3.
Right?
Like super innovative game, incredible meta, great setting, like a masterpiece, probably barely playable if you were to play it in emulation.
It is pretty tough. It is pretty
Yeah.
tough.
Whereas a game like a couple of years ago, I played Super Nintendo, no, not Super, regular Nintendo Zelda 1, gold
Yeah.
cartridge. With
Yes.
my son's a very avid video game creator, player, coder, like creator. He's 15 now. Uh,
Awesome.
so we're playing Zelda 1 on emulator with like a PlayStation controller. Still an awesome game. Still totally playable.
Yeah.
Just it's hard and it's a little finicky because it's like pixel, like it's like I should have been able to like fire and I hit that guy by one pixel and I died. So a little of
Yeah.
that, but the feel is still excellent.
Yes. Nintendo just was able to do that. They still are
Yeah.
like that. It's like
Yeah.
they just work and work and work and work until it feels right. And then they add all the other stuff.
Yeah.
It's like
And
this
feel on
philosophy.
Breath of
Yeah.
the Wild or is it Tears of the Kingdom? Is that the new one?
Yeah.
I haven't played that. I haven't enough time.
Yeah.
I played like
Say
three
goodbye to
quarters.
200 hours when you get that.
Yeah, because I played well because I started my new company around the time that the new one came out, and I had played about three quarters of Breath of the Wild,
Yeah.
and that was definitely a time sink. That's up my alley in
Oh, yeah.
games. Great game. Another
So,
masterpiece.
that's still my favorite. Because it was so trailblazing. I couldn't believe
It
they
is.
just reinvented everything that we knew about Zelda, and they said try this, and it was like wow, it was
Yeah.
amazing.
Zelda interestingly has for a franchise, it has at least three utter masterpieces of
Yes,
groundbreaking in there. Zelda
yes,
1, Ocarina of
yeah,
Time,
yeah,
and Breath of the Wild. Like all three are, and there's other good games in there. There's many,
totally. Like,
but I
did
don't
you
know if
play
anyone
the
has
3DS
three.
game? Did you play the 3DS game where you could go? I always forget the name of it. The one where you could shift perspective and go
I know
up
which
to
one
the
you're
wall.
talking about. And I've watched videos of it. Like I often
Oh
like
God, it's
will,
great.
but I didn't have a 3DS. Like I never had any of those Nintendo handhelds. Like I have a Switch, but like that's a later era.
Yeah, they got to bring that back. But listen, Naughty Dog has been making masterpieces and different franchises, which is very difficult to do for an independent
Yeah,
developer. Shifting from Crash to Jack and Daxter. How? What was it? Way of the Warrior before Crash Bandicoot? What was
yeah. Way of the
the
Warriors immediately before. It's
Okay,
through
well, that's a huge
lessons.
leap, brother. Like
Yeah,
between Way of the
it was
Warrior
very
and
deliberate, but we
Crash
were lucky
Bandicoot.
because
Like,
we
how does that happen? Like, that's hard for a mind to comprehend how Way of the
Way of the Warriors
Warrior
is a good
leads to
game, but it is no masterpiece.
no, and it has no kind of like you can't see. That's I mean, Crash Bandicoot comes out and it's challenging Nintendo. Like
Yeah.
that's huge, man.
You can actually, I like to say, you can see the linear relationship between Crash 1 and Last of Us 2. Like
Yes, you can
all the games in between basically fall in the line there of like they're all like definitively Naughty Dog games. And all
totally.
the games before Way of the Warrior and its predecessors, they have elements of Naughty Dog
They're
gameplay, but
Jason and Andy games.
yeah, it doesn't gel in any of them.
Okay, well, you have to
So
like.
we
How
tried to
does
make it
one
gel.
go
This was
from
a
Way of the
deliberate.
Warrior to Crash Bandicoot? Like, how does that happen?
There were a bunch of different things. Like there was that Jason and I got serious about it, made it like more
Mm,
full time. And
yep.
we very deliberately said to ourselves, we want to make a totally great game, like a game that
Yeah.
has, I mean, there are compromises, but like, so it's not no compromises. Breath of the Wild is the kind of game that has very few
No.
compromises.
Yeah.
Remember,
Yeah.
whatever. But, the I have some issues with the Breath of the Wild, even though it's a masterpiece.
Yeah.
There's almost no games I have no issues with. I mean, I have issues with Elden Ring and whatever, which is what,
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
with WoW, which is probably my all-time favorite game, whatever. Uh, but that doesn't make them not great. But
Yeah.
we tried to do that. And we were like, well, what's it going to take? How are we going to like do this? And we went and systematically looked at all these other fabulous games, like very specifically games like Zelda and the Super Mario World and Yoshi's Island and
Sonic the
Sonic.
Hedgehog.
Yeah, and like Sonic is it's groundbreaking, but it's not actually as much a masterpiece, I think, as
No,
some of the
agreed.
games.
Yeah.
It's
We're
totally
going
it's
to get
got
hate mail that we
elements.
said that though, Andy. Both you and I, we're going to they're going to find us and we're going to get
So
hate
we
mail.
try to do this deliberately. No small part of this growing up of us was also due to like collaboration with Mark Cerny,
Yeah.
like who was our producer in Crash
Yeah.
Run. I give him credit, you know, where credit is due. Mark is a genius and
Genius guy, yes.
an awesome human being and incredible contributor to the art of game making and game machines and so on. So it's not that I mean we did the Mark did plenty of work too, but we did the work. But Mark helped us focus some
Mm.
of this, even though I'm not sure at that time that he himself had created a masterpiece before either.
Yeah.
Like there were, like Marble Madness is a groundbreaking game. It is not flawless
Yeah. Yeah.
or, uh, or anything too. And he had done a lot of really good work, and he's done incredible stuff since.
What's amazing about
But
that,
more
though,
of a
to
sense
reflect
of
on
what
it, is all the work that he did trying to figure out 3D with 2D. And then you
Mhm.
guys finally had these tools to make 3D, and he'd done a lot of that, you
Yeah,
know.
but we were in the process of Crash One, and this is something I don't think people so much appreciate about Crash
Yeah.
One, particularly since they saw it at the context with Mario 64 at the same time.
Yeah.
Different take on 3D is how unknown it was to us going into Crash One, how we were going to translate the fun of like our most specific target was something like Donkey Kong Country, which
Right.
is a tight, very focused platform game.
Yeah.
Like it's not as complex as like Yoshi's Island or something,
Nope.
but it's got really, really clean design it's like a popcorn movie
Yes.
game.
Yeah.
Uh, and we were sort of going for that, like in terms of gameplay and mechanics and stuff. And Dunkirk is a great feel and stuff too. So the but to translate that into 3D was so difficult and so unknown at this time.
Sure.
Like, and really like Jason, Dave, Baggett, who also, and Mark worked on this problem together and tried to figure out our, and then adding in Bob and Taylor, it's stuff to try to like come up with our solution eventually. And it took us over about a year, like of working on Crash Bandicoot to make something that was fun.
That's the Nintendo way.
Yeah. And
That's what they do there.
this is what, and Mark like had, knew this and like sort of like, like kind of could clearly articulate this. And then to focus us, it was like, it's not fun yet. It's not
Right.
fun yet. We
Right.
keep working on the playability until it's fun.
Was it all gray boxes and like no
Oh, we had
texture?
our, I mean, there was some great bugs, but there were two major levels that never shipped. They've been seen on
Yeah.
the internet, bits and pieces, a jungle level and a lava level, both
Okay.
of which were like utterly useless. The construction of them could never have been fun in the way where, and we were trying different things on those levels, combined with the first level to be made that's in the game is Cortex Power Station, where it sweeps down through the entrance of Cortex into Cortex's power station. But the initial versions of that level that were made in the summer of '95
Yeah.
were not at all. Like, but the construction of the level was close enough that after we figured out what was fun, we were able to go back and make it fun by rebuilding it
Awesome.
somewhat. So, but the first level that was actually fun was a different later level, like trying to remember, they all had letter codes. It was E, and E was like uh, a a side scrolling one where there were steam dents. I went shh, shh,
Yeah,
shh,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
and they were like big bouncy spring platforms that you soared way up and down on, and platforms that dropped out and stuff. But it
Those
was
2D
basically
levels were amazing. And it also was so amazing that you broke up the action that way and surprised us with all of this variety. Was there ever a thought from you guys, why don't we just make it all 2D? Why don't we just make it
well,
all a
there was
side scroll?
so at first with those two early levels, we were going to make it all 3D.
Okay.
Couldn't figure out how to do it. So we backstepped after Cortex Power One. Just it was better, but it was still not fun.
Mhm.
And we're like, okay, let's just make a 2D one. I mean, it's going to be in 3D with the 3D
Yeah,
models,
yeah, yeah.
but we know how the mechanics of this work.
Right.
So let's just put Crash in there in 2D basically, and we'll take some of these same power elements, so like the steam, the pistons, and the bounce, and we'll make some bouncy things. And like that's like a like that sounds like a cool mechanic. Like I don't know if well, I guess there's spring bouncy things in Sonic and whatever, but they're like fairly typical. Like but it was a bit faster and like certainly more 3D looking than had been seen before. So we
Yeah.
made that we were actually able relatively swiftly to make that level fun.
Hmm.
So we're like, oh, at least something is fun. That level seemed pretty cool. And like, so then we're like, okay, uh, let's half step back to 3D. And the next level was one of those ones where the camera was kind of above a bit and the like you moved, it was 3D, but you moved in the we call the XZ plane. Like you
Hmm.
could go left or right or into and out of, but you kind of it's almost a Diablo-like perspective. There's a bunch of levels that
Sure.
are like
Sure.
so we made one of those using like similar pieces, some of the same drop platforms, and like some. I think it had fire instead of like the steam things, and like and we were able, because of the tracks were narrow, we were able to control the enemies, and like and we were able to make that fun. But it had an extra dimensionality that had never been in a 2D game at all. It was clearly not 2D. We're like, that turned out fun. We're like, whew, okay. Uh, and then we were like, it was quite a while before we came back to Cortex Power and some of these other ones. Like, I don't remember who had it or whatever, but there's a lot of Indiana Jones influence.
For
Indiana Jones.
sure. Yes. Yeah. The rolling boulder
And
and all of that.
yeah, so that's what I'm coming back to. So we had these pieces that we had built for like one of the early jungle level things. It wasn't fun, but we had like pieces for jungle. And
Sure.
we were like, and someone we were thinking, because we were thinking, okay, we're moving side to side and up and down. Then we're moving in and out and left and right. Well, what if we came at the screen where you can see
Mm.
across the space? And we're like, what's at the screen? And someone's like, well, it's like Indiana Jones being chased by the boulder. We're like,
That's
so,
money in the bank.
yeah. So we tried this. That was actually able to eat, not that hard to make fun because it was constrained enough. The boulder drives the whole pace of it forward.
Yeah.
It's just frantic. There's not that many
Yeah.
things on it. There's like
Right.
fences, it's
Yeah.
in the boulder.
Yeah. And when you fail on that, it's part of the fun because
Yeah,
you blame you. You don't blame the game. You blame you. But there is like a predictive response thing that you have to be able to do it quickly. Brilliant. And we
it's a
hadn't played
very
anything really like that before.
yeah. So that one is was very unique because of the turn, and we're like, so then we're like, okay, flip it. We went back to those pieces like that may have been D, I think was the boulder one, and so I definitely remember C was next up. So C, we were going back to these ones, so we had the same pieces. We're like, well, let's flip it around again and go into
Yeah.
the script. Like C became Jungle Rollers.
Great.
You can tell the invert because we were working on this stuff 30 years ago. And I haven't actually had a conversation about this particular pathway of stuff in decades, but I still remember all these details because Crash, everything about Crash completely imprinted
Oh,
on me.
it changed the business. I mean, it changed your lives and it built Naughty Dog to this
Yeah.
preeminence. Like it instantly converted Naughty Dog to one of the most important game developers on earth, and they still remain that. And it must have just been this. I honestly have to ask what it was like to see Nathan Drake play through Crash Bandicoot in Uncharted 4.
That was
What was
awesome.
that moment for you?
Well, I knew it was coming, like, uh, because Evan and Eric, uh, Evan Wells, my good friend and former, he was my successor as
Yeah.
and uh and Eric Bengillion, who's like one of my best friends and is the senior most artist at Naughty Dog and has been there since Crash 2.
Yeah.
He's now the second oldest person. He's certainly the longest running senior person. There's
That's
one
awesome.
who's been there, like Charlotte Francis, like who was a texture and sort of like poster and marketing artist who came on Crash 1 is actually the longest
Charlotte is
surviving
still there.
Yeah. Last year, Justin retired. He was the only other one from Crash 1. So
I
now
saw that.
Eric is actually the only, Eric and Malcolm's a texture artist, are the only people left from Crash.
That's
And
amazing.
this is not like because of any mass exodus. They last like it's just because of the fact that there weren't that many people numerically there were only 7 total people who worked on Crash Bandicoot 1.
Yeah.
So it just has to do with like the sort of expanding size and the time,
Yeah.
like 30
Yeah.
years. But I do want people to like particularly young people who love games and are thinking about like making games to appreciate that, like whether it was us then or Miyamoto and his team on NES Zelda, or the guys working on Adventure, or Mark working on Marble Madness, every detail mattered to us. Like we cared then. People who worked on Last of Us 2. I can see one person who worked on Last of Us 2 right now. Working now. The like they care about like the art of game making and like all the details and all the things that went into all this back and forth. Those were figuring things out in Crash One. Like that's done on every good game team.
Yeah.
But in various degrees, certain games are harder than others. Like if you're making a sequel on the same machine, or you're a more middling team that's not pushing the boundaries, maybe maybe certain decisions are slightly easier, more rote. But no game is easy. No real game. And
Yes, yeah, I always keep that in mind when I'm reviewing them. And it's something that as I was out in the field a lot more interviewing people, I recognize that, they don't always work, but the work to get to that point is unbelievable. And every game feels impossible. It feels like so
even
many
small
things have to come together.
even small games like I was playing a couple of years ago, Hollow Knight, which
Yeah.
I still really like platform games, so I play a
Yeah,
lot of
me
them.
too.
And Hollow Knight is a masterpiece also. It's like, you know, one of the best Metroidvanias, like 2D Metroidvanias, and it comes down to its mechanics. Controls and mechanics are superlative. It's level
Yeah.
divine. It's not
Yeah.
superlative. It's very much a Metroid game. It's more Metroid than Vania.
Those
uh,
those devs are going to be so happy to hear Andy Gavin, one of the creators of Crash Bandicoot, give them
that
praise
was a
like that.
small team game, but lovingly created. I think it took them a while.
Yeah.
From the minute I started playing that, I could see the craftsmanship that went into it, the art, the music, the style, and in the placement of everything, in the refinement of every little bit of feel of the jumps and the double jumps and the wall creeps and like the bouncing off the things with the pin. Super. I mean, it must have taken them years probably to get the controls
Well,
that
we're
good.
all waiting for Silk Song, and it feels like, we know it's coming. We just don't know when it's coming. Probably
Yeah.
it'll be this year. Yeah.
And you can nuance in like different games. Like another one I very much enjoyed in that genre would be Ori. I
Yeah.
want to try out um, the new sort of like ARPG from that team.
Yes. Yes.
That's
From
like
Moon. Yeah.
just went into early access, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I
There's a
usually
lot of great stuff
I'm not in a hurry, so I usually wait till they're like
until they're done. I'm kind of the same too. I have so much stuff to review that I just wait. Yeah. I can't
I have
really
no
dive
time
in
for
on.
playing right now, unfortunately. Like I
Yeah.
am the only thing I played since starting this new company in any weight was Baldur's Gate 3, and I'm still stuck. I got so busy I had to abandon it somewhere early in Act 3. Uh
Another masterpiece. We're hitting the bangers here. Let's go back to Crash though for a second here. You guys worked how long to get the first Crash out? Because there's actually a sizable chunk of time between Way of the Warrior and Crash Bandicoot 1. How
yeah.
long was development on Crash 1? And was there an appreciation that you were building a franchise and that you were going to be coming back with sequels? Was that in the plan right from the get-go with Crash?
Uh Not well. I mean, you always would make a sequel if you did well.
Yeah.
But we weren't even thinking about it. There was a plan to actually try to make a mascot game,
Yeah.
but it was like a pipe dream. Wouldn't it be great if we could do that? Otherwise, it was just going to be like, sort of like where a game like Earthworm Jim would sit, where it was like like a very good
Cult
platform
classic.
for the machine, but we thought but we wanted to put everything that goes into like a mascot game into it. And as it turned out, Sony just wasn't working on their own mascot game. And then uh, we had our whole little scheme by which we showed it to them. And we're like, well, wouldn't this make a great mascot game? And there was actually a whole division. Some people, Sony, actually, Ken Kutaragi did not want a mascot.
Yeah.
He thought it needed.
Well, I remember Polygon Man. I got one of those shirts at the very first E3,
Yeah.
and there was a whole different vibe there, right? Yeah.
And Ken's also a genius, but there's certain things like about like the gamers and marketing and whatever. I don't
Yeah.
think he
Yeah.
got.
Get a
Like there's
second job. We all remember that.
yeah, and the 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 inherent like tension and personification between like Crash and Mario, between Crash and Sonic, like added fuel to the marketing fire for both the games and the systems that in a useful way to all involved.
Yes. Yes. Were you guys disappointed that Crash because it reached a level of prominence and everybody assumed it to be a mascot, but Sony never really took that up. They never really said,
Yeah,
okay,
that was like I think they might have like if it was very complicated with the legacy of Universal's rights
yes,
in there and with Universal's like ever like studio manager well first of all like they if the same management had remained there
hmm
then we probably could have worked something like if it had stayed as MCA Universal. I mean, they
yeah,
had a big that like we probably could have worked something out. Then when Seagram's bought them, that started to take things in a weird, different direction. Like, and they had no understanding, like the brass that Seagram's put in for the studio. I don't think they didn't understand like making movies either. I don't think, but
yeah,
they really
yeah.
didn't understand games. And then there was Vivendi and it just like
Oh, that sucks.
when like so those things which were beyond our control having to do with like the trajectory of this like large corporate entity that controlled some portion of the rights like just drifted off in a weird direction. And by
Yeah,
the time it ended up back with a company that actually knew games when Vivendi Interactive parts got acquired by Activision,
yeah.
like too
You'd
much
move
water
on.
passed under the bridge. Well, we had
Yeah.
long.
You moved on to Jack and Daxter,
Yeah, one of the
and
main reasons we moved on to Jack and Dexter was to extricate ourselves from the rights problems.
right. And you independent again at that point? You hadn't sold to
We were
Sony
always
yet,
no,
right?
we were always. I mean, well, we were always independent until we sold to Sony.
Yeah. And so
Sony,
Jack and Daxter was owned by Naughty Dog.
yeah,
Yeah, and then it got acquired by PlayStation and Sony,
you might
and
say
it
in its earliest phase before they acquired us, Jack and Dexter was like a joint. It was a joint venture between Naughty Dog and Sony. You might
okay,
say.
okay. Are you surprised that those games were amazing too? And I mean, congratulations, because that's really impossible to do to go from one very successful franchise and then jump to another one on new hardware. But
Well, I
are
mean,
you
United four.
Yeah,
Jack's probably the weakest sales wise, like, but of the four. But I'm sure their order, it's it would be, Crash and The Last of Us, Slayer, then Uncharted, then Jack in terms of sales and sort of popular fame.
well, they're all incredible,
Yeah, they each
and
are
Jack
great.
was successful.
Yeah, it did
Are
well.
you surprised that there hasn't been new Jack and Daxter games? Are you surprised that PlayStation?
Yeah, so Sony does totally own all those rights. Like so
Yeah,
Sony, it's actually those rights are still not by Sony per se, but by Naughty Dog. But Naughty
yeah,
Dog's a subsidiary of Sony. So Sony could absolutely do those if they want, and they've done the remasters and so on. Like I suspect it's like I can't comment on why they wouldn't. It has its like whether it's a franchise you would have to really think about how to bring it into the
right,
2020. And
right.
then there's really just opportunity cost. There's the fact that uh, they only really make like one in some games at once.
Yeah,
And, so in each of those time periods, they were working on Uncharted 1, 2, 3, 4, The Last of Us. Last of Us, actually, no, The Last of Us, Uncharted 4, uh, The Last of Us 2. So they had each of that period, they would have to choose, okay, we're going to do Jack and Dexter instead of whatever that is, The Last
right.
of Us 2 or whatever. So it just hasn't come up in as being the best thing. This is me speculating, the best thing to work on at that particular
Yeah,
junction.
And Naughty Dog really hasn't gone the way, and I don't know if this was under your stewardship or just the philosophy at the company. It really hasn't gone the way of sharing. I guess it did with Dexter, but sharing the IP with another developer and kind of supervising it. Um, Naughty
The
Dog
only
has
reason I
tended,
entertained that with Dexter was
yeah,
the one of those studio heads was an ex Naughty Dog.
right, yeah. What was that team again? They got big into
Naughty
VR.
Dog.
Yeah, Ready at Dawn. Yeah, excellent company, excellent company. So let's talk about the moving to Uncharted because I think with Uncharted it was a full embrace. You had a really really great sort of maturation with Jack and Daxter in terms of telling stories and really feeling like we were playing through an animated series. Just beautiful, very funny games, really well written, great dialogue. But Uncharted was another level still. It was this new interactive movie in the
Yeah. Well,
grandest
I
sense.
started. Well, that's the direction we were going since particularly. It started with Jack a bit. I mean, there were a lot of different thrusts going in Naughty Dog of things we really cared about, like
Yeah.
seamless, complete worlds, unifying like every element of the game with the art design and the world building and so on. Great gameplay and so on. But storytelling became increasingly one of them particularly from Jack 1 and into Jack 2. In Jack 2, like as we dabbled into it, uh, in like telling more of a movie. Tech 2 and Jack 3 are almost somewhat movie-like. They're
Yes.
very strong ancestors to Uncharted and The Last of Us. And the with its kind of integrated cutscenes and like and we basically come back to that Raiders of the Lost Ark influence. Like Uncharted was pretty much straight up, let's make a game that feels like Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Absolutely.
Like
Absolutely.
it has its own slightly different, it's a little uh kitschier. But
Yep.
Raiders is kind of kitschy too and campy.
Oh,
So
it was full on a modern Indiana Jones. Like it
yeah,
embodied, it became instantly one of my favorite franchises and games because it was so, Amy and I forget was it Dan?
yeah.
The writers just really understood the vernacular and what we wanted out of an experience like that. And it was different, but it was such a beautiful homage. I
Yeah, so,
love that franchise.
that's it's like, it's it's inspiration. It's like, well, what if it was a game that has like all the great things you like about, something like Indiana Jones, but you play it and you play as the character. Like, so like that's its sort of like core concept.
Yeah. Were you
Uh,
still programming during that time or were you
I was still
supervising?
programming, but not on that game.
No.
So Uncharted actually began during Jack 2. And
Wild.
I was like the team lead, but I was the producer really.
Okay. On Uncharted?
I, yeah, I didn't write almost any line like single digit lines of code. I don't almost nothing.
Were you
Uh,
prepared for that? Because I've talked to lots of developers that move into. I mean, you really had
but I
no
was still
choice. You
programming all
own
the
the
time
company.
because
Yeah,
I was programming like crazy on Jack 2 and Jack 3. And so at the same time, like I had two hats.
yeah. Did you enjoy the supervision and guiding team members, or
Yeah, but it
did
was
you
still
prefer?
so like the Uncharted took a long time. So by the
Yeah,
time it was still in quite early phases, like when I left. So
yeah.
the core idea of the make, it's gonna be a game like Indiana Jones. Sort of that was there, but like I'm trying to remember there was some point where the character name changed. I think it may have already been Drake at that point. But a lot changed
Yeah.
after a lot. It's like barely recognizable to the ideas that were there. Like the core ideas there, but like the details were
Did you
transformed like post
were
game.
you there through the Uncharted games, or did you had you already moved on?
So I
And
left at the end of 2004, and Uncharted
okay,
was this like kind of not even first playable state, like really, because
gotcha.
The PlayStation 3 wasn't out.
Yeah, yeah.
Like, there were just early super secret dev units, and
That's crazy. And
it
but you
wasn't
had an
PlayStation 2, so it was a game design.
totally. You had an inkling of the ambition of the studio. Was it a different Naughty Dog? Did it feel like it was growing exponentially to prepare for this new technology?
Uh, it was just growing. Like the numerical growth was in the really in art for the mainline games.
Yeah.
But the new, but with each ratchet up in the tech, everything became more and harder and harder.
Was it, did you,
Two and the
you and,
three were very difficult machines. Like both PlayStation 2 and PlayStation 3 were very complicated machines.
yeah. Was that part of your decision to leave Naughty Dog? Was just to take it easy
Not
on
that the
yourself?
machines were kind of like, I was just burnt out, essentially.
Yeah. And did you and Jason decide together to leave, or did one of you
Yeah, well,
say, "I'm"?
our contracts were up, like so we would actively renew them.
Gotcha. And did you have was it a difficult decision, or was it just felt like the
Yeah, it
time?
was difficult, but like I just needed a break, and there just didn't seem to ever be a break. Like
That was that was going to
naturally.
be one of my questions, but you weren't at Naughty Dog because I can't, in this moment remember all of the, intricacies of time. Time is so fluid now, especially after COVID. But
I know
one thing
it's
I
so
reflect on, yeah, one thing I reflect on all the time is on the PlayStation 3, we got four major, massive Naughty Dog games. And that blows my mind that we got one, two, and three and Last of Us on one console generation. That seems impossible now.
Yeah,
And
I was actually just talking last night with so last night with I think or maybe the night before something uh with some other senior game people about this like the incredible scope of the projects and just how long it takes and this had to do with the pandemic thing and realizing that Last of Us 2 came out 4 years ago
yeah,
and they don't have an announced game.
I know. I know.
There,
That must be
there,
weird for you as the Naughty Dog
there,
guy.
there are games, and they will be amazing, but uh, but they're not even close enough to be announced. Like, they get announced at least like, 9 months a year, or whatever before, and so that length of time is like,
It's amazing. That's four games from the old days.
yeah, well, it was brutal. With the Crash games, we did them year on year,
Yeah.
and really they should have been 2 years. It was like we were killing ourselves to do them then.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you think that is what led you to leave Naughty Dog? Was it just
It
this
probably
relentless
contributed.
pace?
It made a big difference, like financially. Like when we couldn't
Yeah.
do it so Crash 1, 2 years, Crash 2, 1 year, Crash 3, 1 year, CTR. It looked like 1 year, but it was actually almost two because we were running some in parallel.
Yeah.
Uh, Jack 1 was actually 3 years, but it looked like two because we
Yeah.
were hiding a year of it. Uh, two was Jack 2 was 2 years. Jack 3, 1 year. Oh God, again. Uh,
Mm.
Jack X 1 year, like, and then it just became impossible to sustain that rate. Like, so we'd already sort of
Totally.
slipped with Jack games to call it 1.5. Like we're doing this 1-2 thing, and it was really
Yeah.
brutal.
Yeah. How many people worked on Crash 3?
20 some,
Okay, so you went from a team of seven on the first one to 20 something on the
or maybe like
but
18 or something. By CTR was probably close to 30, high 20s.
yeah, that was an incredible game. Holy crap. What is, when you reflect on the games you helped to make and help to build with Naughty Dog, what's the one that you're proudest of?
It would be Crash 2. It's my favorite.
Yeah, that's awesome.
I think it's like the sweet spot, the sweetest spot. I mean, I'm proud of all of them. They all have
Yeah.
great stuff. And like, yeah, I have certain very fond spots for almost all of them. And like, particularly like Jack 1, I think like has a lot of real incredible, there's a lot of really interesting new stuff in Jack 2 too. But
Yep.
like, but one has a certain feel that's like really awesome. But Crash 2 had this total sweet spot of uh like where it like achieved everything that we really wanted to in one that couldn't fit in and fixed all the major issues with one.
Yeah.
And it's just a really, really tight, brilliant game, I think. Three is it's some ways better, but I think three has a few too many gimmick levels for my taste.
Yeah.
Like it's got the regular levels too, and it's got this incredible polish and lots of more stuff, but and it's like better looking, but two has like just the right amount of gimmick.
It's your Empire Strikes Back.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's awesome.
actually pretty similar in that way. And three is a little like Return of the Jedi. Return of the Jedi is still a great movie,
Yeah.
but it's got a few Ewoks moments, Ewok
Yeah,
moments.
and it has the Kodak moment at the end where everybody's standing together and smiling at the camera. Yeah, I know, I love it too. But yeah, Empire was the one, and that's so cool.
PPR would be like the Rogue One.
Oh yeah, great analogy. Oh God,
Yeah,
I love Rogue One. Oh
Rogue
man,
One
you're
is the
making me.
most underappreciated Star Wars movie.
Can you believe Gary wrote that thing? I mean, it just, and that is one of those movies where every time you watch it, you like it a little more. You appreciate it a little more every single time. Yeah, I freaking love Rogue One.
It's the most
How
adult
long?
by far.
Totally. And Andor is incredible. How long into Crash One and it being on the market, like after that weekend, did Sony say, okay, we're making a sequel? Or like, how did you know
Oh,
you were on this
like
ride?
it was long before it even came out. I mean, we're already rolling into it. It
Oh,
was
yeah.
like it was obvious. Like, I mean, it's all better than we expected, but it was begged for a sequel.
Yeah, that's
That was
awesome.
terrifying. Like that year, Crash 2 was also the hardest year of my life. Like literally was in the office like pretty much every single day, all day.
Yeah, yeah.
I didn't go to a store that year. Like,
No vacations.
yeah, I come September 9th. I had not been in a store or restaurant
Oh wow.
except for
What
Jersey.
did your family say about this commitment? How did it go with your parents
I
and
didn't
with
really
your
see my family that
yeah?
year.
Were they feeling bad for you? Were they excited, or what was going on for
Well,
all of
they were
them?
just like, oh, he's working hard or whatever,
Yeah.
I was
Were
27
you
and well, you know,
27 at that time? Yeah. Were you married at that time, or seeing
I,
anybody, or
I met my wife during Crash 3.
during Crash 3? Okay, cool. And has there been this?
Wait, no, no, no,
Obviously,
not during Crush 3. Actually, Crush 3 was on sale, but like, yeah, I guess it was actually during CTR.
yeah,
Uh, Crush 3 had just finished. Like, sometimes there's this like over, it gets a little harder over the years because like the game, like right after a game is finished, it's on your mind a lot because you're marketing it at the same time and it's for sale
sure,
and like,
sure.
well. And even though I was actually working on CTR and Jack and Dexter technology,
Yeah. Did the games take a toll on your personal life? Were you able to
there
have the
wasn't
personal?
any personal life like other than doing those Crash games.
Well, there's been, Naughty Dog's been in the news because a lot of that kind of crunch culture sort of, and it's not just Naughty Dog, it's all over the business, but it came to a head and it got out there. And there's been this real effort to, and maybe this is why we haven't got an announcement, since The Last of Us Part Two. But was there an effort, as you guys were moving to Jack and Daxter and PlayStation 2 to kind of look at that and I don't know, figure out how to not burn the candle at both ends within the industry, or was it still
We were
developing
trying to figure it
itself?
out, but by the time it's still that hadn't been sorted out at all. I think it's not
Yeah,
quite as, but I still think it's like painful. I mean, I still deal with that all the time now.
yeah.
Like I like mostly work.
You
I mean,
must.
yeah, well, but I have my other things. Like I have some my hot. Yeah, there's more balance, and I spend a lot more time with my family. But I don't see as much my family as I would like because I'm like juggling lots of stuff.
Um, I want to talk about what's going on with you now, but
You should because
the
I
one,
do kind of rap because I got so much work to get back
yeah,
to.
yep, no, I feel you. I feel you. Last question about the Naughty Dog
Oh, I
days, and I
love
know
I
this
love I can talk about this stuff
all the time.
endless.
Yep, me too. Okay, last question about Naughty Dog, and this was after you'd left, but what was it like for you to see Harrison Ford playing Uncharted 3 and playing the game, the game that was inspired by his work?
Yeah, I mean, all this stuff is just like super cool. I'm incredibly proud of like all the men and women who like I said, see, you know, set it in motion with like a lot of the standards and stuff, but all the work like of those incredible, basically all the work from Uncharted and Last of Us and all that, it's all done by other incredibly talented people, like Evan and Neil and everyone who worked with and for them. And shout out to my peeps, Eric, the who's responsible for the look of all the Uncharted's and The Last of Us. Like he's the art director. But I just can't be more proud of them for having like taken just what was just a sort of message of like make an incredible game with the desk tech that's available now and do something innovative. They just kept doing it. And even though it gets harder and harder and harder, every bit of that is just, see Last of Us on TV is like, I'm jealous of Neil for getting to be a showrunner. Because that's something I would like to do someday or something.
Well, you created that platform, bro. Let's real quick get the what you're up to now, because I think that's going to be the people are going to be very curious. What does Andy Gavin do these days?
Well, I can't be too specific, but I have a new stealth AI startup, and we were actually applying the same basic philosophy to a different thing of trying to like merge like tech and artistry and bring to life something like really cool and incredible with a focus on details and sort of craftily pushing the limits of everything. And like because like oh my God, is AI and technology in general moving fast to like I mean, maybe people who dabble in it a little have some sense of it, but like being in the thick, like the rate of progress is like just terrifying. Almost like, if you go in a year from Will Smith snarfing spaghetti to Sora, even though Sora isn't actually out, like, and although the amount of compute that goes behind Sora is just mind-boggling, but the like in all the stuff that is like happening and the unknowns of where it's all going, we're in for a wild ride over the next forever as we slide into singularity. And I'm not really even kidding anymore. I used to joke about the singularity, which I half believed in. Now it's not a half; it's an all.
And now it's coming.
Yeah.
When do you think it's coming? How much time do we have?
That is hard to predict.
Yeah.
But a lot of things will be like unrecognizable in some ways in like 10 years, 20 years. Like,
and is it the games that we can dream up using this technology that's interesting?
I think I don't think it's going to hit games first. They're more complicated than all the other medias. So it will be influenced. AI will be used as tools early on. Already is being used as tools for like concept. Makes you a faster programmer and stuff. But games being more complicated, being technological and artistic at the same time, and like it'll affect like, well, it'll affect making YouTube content much faster than it will games. It's like where it's all heading, I don't know. I mean, I think it's going to like swiftly replace the creative content. I actually don't want to really watch a mess of videos where they're all like synthesized talking heads.
No.
Like when videos are straight talking heads, like with nothing going on, I mostly listen to them anyway. And I watch all the YouTube and stuff, like, but like it's an incredible medium. Like, don't really like the short videos, like, but you can learn. There's so many things that actually YouTube is like one of the others use YouTube to be synonymous for sort of medium form videos, anywhere from like 5 minutes to an hour or two, like for like everything from like learning to cook or to repair your bicycle to learning about physics or how to play a particular game or get better at playing a League of Legends champion or whatever it is. Like it's a great
starting a tremendously successful video game studio. like this conversation right here. How much from games do you think is going to help you with this new business? How much of the lessons you learned developing games and working with people?
Huge amounts, like, because it's an interactive consumer product. So it's like with graphics, which is like, that's games are that kind of thing too.
Yeah, yeah. When are we going to see the stealth product that you're building? When do you think?
Yeah. We'll see.
Well, Andy, this has been amazing. I'm really grateful you took the time. Thank you, my friend. And yeah, please reach out when you're ready to talk about the new things that you're developing. Would love to reconnect on that. But congratulations on all of your success, and to all of your teammates and former teammates at Naughty Dog. I'm a huge fan of all of the things that your company has provided us, and it's really great to connect with you.
Yeah, and thanks for a super fun interview and like really interesting.
My pleasure. But make sure you're checking out all the classic interviews that we had with Andy and Jason and other Naughty Dog people on EP. You can go to watch those classic episodes at youtube.com/EPNTV if you're listening to this. Thank you all for watching. Thank you, Andy, Gavin. We will see you soon. And until then, play forever.